I'm Katie and this is Sam, and join us today for a 20-minute pelvic floor restore. We're going to jump down onto our mats to begin with. So sitting down, finding your feet flat and knees at the ceiling. If you're still relatively new postpartum, feel free to use your arms to bring yourself down. If you're feeling a little stronger, you can start to use it as a little articulation through the spine. So nice and heavy through the shoulders, nice and heavy through the hips. I want you to find the heels of your hands and just place them on top of your hip bones, finding your fingertips heavy over your abdomen. So just be aware of where your hip bones are and where your pubic bone is. And we're going to take a few deep breaths, and I want you to think of sending the breath all the way to the belly. So nice full breath in, and nice strong exhale out through the mouth. As you breathe out through the mouth, I want you to feel like you're blowing out candles on your birthday cake. Sometimes it can feel a little silly to be so audible with the breath, but I promise, the more you get used to breathing like this, especially in this restorative phase, the better everything functions. Again, full breath in. Allow the belly to fill up, full breath out. And just allow that diaphragm to work as it's designed. As we start to breathe again, I'm going to ask you to come into a pelvic tilt. So we're just rolling the hips forwards and backwards. So if I've given you a Malteser and place that Malteser in between the center of your hip bones, as you move through your pelvis, you want to think of rolling that Malteser towards your pubic bone and then rolling that Malteser all the way back towards your belly button. Keep the hips on the floor, but just finding that mobility for the lower back, for the back of the pelvis. And only use a range that feels good here. So even if you have more range available to you, if it feels nicer just to keep it small to start with, keep it nice and small. You might find to begin with that you're actually pressing through your heels and squeezing your bottom a little bit. And to start with, as we repair, that's absolutely fine. What we want to find is the shape and the movement, and then the strength will come. Once you've taken a few of these, find the place where it feels the nicest to be. So if you're familiar with Pilates, it's similar to a neutral pelvis, but I don't want you to think of it as a specific fixed space. So find the place where it just feels the best. Where does it feel the nicest for your back, for the abdominals, and for your hip flexors? From here, we're going to replace our hands wide either side of our hips, and we're going to use our breath to start to peel our heels off the floor. So take a breath in. As you breathe out, feel that breath wrap around you. You are starting to connect to the front of the torso, and just peel your right heel off the floor. Keep the right heel high, inhale. As you exhale, peel the left heel off the floor. From here, if that's enough, stay here. But I want you to try and take as much tension out of the feet as possible. So maybe bring yourself up to the very top of the pad of the big toe. So you're almost pointing your feet like a ballet point. If that's enough, stay here. Find to keep the arms down. Option to float one arm up to the sky, second arm up to the sky. Palms face one another. As you inhale, we're going to widen the arms out to a T shape. Inhale out. As we exhale, we're going to use the breath to fire the fingertips back together. Inhaling out and exhaling back together. Inhaling out and exhaling back together. If you feel like your knees are splaying, try to keep them as parallel as you can. So try to avoid the knees knocking away from one another. And it should feel like it's just a nice feeling of togetherness across the front of the torso. We're going to go for 2 more. If you need to, you can place the balls of the feet back down onto the floor, or even the full heels back down to the floor, taking this wherever it feels nice for you. And bringing those fingertips back up, we're going to turn our palms this time so our palms face our thigh bones. Again, if you need the heels flat, place the heels flat, but option to lift either heel and try to think of taking weight out of the toes, but not actually lifting the legs off the floor. From here, think of where your rib cage sits. So bottom of rib cage and top of hip bones. And as we move the arms, I don't want your pelvis to move away from your rib cage or your rib cage to pop away from your pelvis. So take a beautiful inhale and slide the arms over your head. And exhale, and with resistance, really press those arms long, long, long to the outside of the hips. Again, full breath in. And full breath out. If your shoulders are feeling uncomfortable, you can take this small range. It doesn't have to go all the way over the head, but it is quite nice just to find that amount of movement as we go. Remember to keep breathing, and if you've forgotten which way around to breathe, that's completely fine. Just try not to hold your breath. At this point in time, we really want to avoid holding the breath, generating any intra-abdominal pressure, any intra-pelvic pressure. And we avoid that by just keeping the breath nice and solid. Exhaling, pressing the fingertips down. Heels as high as you can. And really bring that awareness to where your rib cage and your hips are. Have you let them pop apart? Last two, inhaling, arms over the head. Exhale, press the arms down long. Inhale over the head, and exhale, press down long. Replace the heels to the floor, replace the hands to the floor. Easiest option for the arms is to keep the hands on the floor just a little wider than the hips. For a little bit more of a challenge, you can bring the arms to a T shape. I'm going to keep my arms in a T shape today just for a little bit of challenge. Sam, if you want to keep your hands by the side of your hips so you can see the variations with the two of us. I want you to imagine that I've placed a book on your left kneecap, and I want you to think of where that pelvis sits and where your tailbone sits. So find your weight even so that the tailbone is nice and heavy. As you inhale, we're just going to let the right leg move away from your center line, keeping the weight centered on your tailbone and keeping the left knee pointing directly to the ceiling. Use your exhale, inner thighs, and that core activation to bring the leg back in. And then we're going to switch legs. Other leg comes out. And it's actually really difficult to keep the static leg stable. What you'll want to do naturally is use it as a counterbalance and try and take it away from your midline. So keep the leg, which isn't moving, vertical, kneecap pointing directly to the ceiling, finding that movement out and in. We've got two more on each leg. Inhale out. And imagine that the exhale really drives everything back together. So you're not trying to use your inner thigh to start the movement. You're finding the connection with your breath out. And it's that wraparound feeling in the core that brings the legs back together. Last, one on each leg here. Exhale, inhale, and exhale. Brilliant. From here, I'm going to get you to bring your hands back on top of your hips because I want you to feel where our focus is. This is a tricky one to get your head around, but once you've got your head around it, it's super effective. So again, just find where it is your ribs and hips want to sit. Try not to let the rib cage pop out. Try not to let anything push or dome out through the abdomen. Keeping your right leg as heavy as you can and your left leg still, I want you to slide your right leg as far away from you on the mat. Now, when you stretch it out, just again, bring your awareness to where your hip bones are and where your rib cage is. You don't want to have let that hip extend so long that there's a different amount of space between one side's hip and ribs and the other side's hip and ribs. So try and stay as square as you can. We're now weighting that right heel as heavily as you can into the floor and using your exhale to drag that heel back in. Same again with the left. Inhale, slide the left leg out. And it doesn't matter if you don't get to a full extension, but try and keep square across the framework of your torso. Exhale, drag that heel back in. I have to say this is infinitely easier in socks. So if you've got some socks handy, pop them on so you've got that really, really heavy foot to drag back in. And this actually took me a little while to get. I definitely wanted to lift my leg off the floor, but the trick is to really weight that heel back in and think of dragging that heel back in using the abdominals. One more on each side. Inhaling, slide out. Exhaling, drawing all the way back in, really nice. Inhaling, slide out. Exhaling, sliding all the way back in. From here, just replace your heels a little closer to your hips, kneecaps pointed to the ceiling. Hands can stay low, hands can come to T-shape, or hands can come all the way over the head. The further away your fingertips are from your hips, the more stability you'll find you need through your core. Take a breath in. As we breathe out, we're going to press through our heels, pelvic tilt, and then start to peel the lower back off the floor, scooping, tucking, rolling, lifting. Now, if, like me, it takes you a while to find where that sweet spot is, you might want to go past and find a little bit of extension, but then come back down and find the space across the middle of the shoulder blades. Find a little hollow out through the rib cage, press into those heels, and use your bottom to press your pelvis higher to the ceiling. So it's almost like you're trying to iron out through your hip flexors. And this should feel like a little reciprocal, just a hollow out between those hip bones. Taking that beautiful breath in at the top, expand the rib cage, and use that increased surface area to scoop, tuck, roll, and articulate down through. Now, if your range has shortened here, don't panic. It's by moving through that we're going to increase the range. Come through a flat back out to your neutral, and we repeat again. Full breath in, full breath out, scoop, tuck, roll, articulate. Find a heel press, and then lift the bottom off, peeling the rib cage up until you're centered across the middle of the shoulder blades. So we want the rib cage to stay connected down. We don't want to puff out here and come onto the neck. So make sure that you are scooping down, weight centered across the middle of the shoulder blades. From this position, we're going to keep our position here. Press into your heels and think of your glutes. We almost want to feel like we're bypassing our hamstrings because your glute engagement is so strong. So you're going to have to use your brain power here and really think of your butt. Inhale as your hips drop an inch. Exhale, press through your heels and squeeze your butt, lengthening your hip bones to the ceiling. Inhale, lower an inch. Exhale, press up. We've got two more. Inhale, lower an inch. Exhale, press those heels into the floor, squeeze. Inhale, lower an inch. Find that press up and just have a look and double check that you haven't splayed your legs, keeping them nice and parallel. From here, imagine that your hips are completely level, and you're going to place a champagne flute in the center of your abdomen. And I want you to feel like you're sliding your champagne flute from side to side. So just finding a little lateral action, so a little space through the side of the spine. And we're going to start to articulate down, sliding through, pressing the hips from side to side. Now, the hardest thing here is not to let the hips rotate. So imagine that you're balancing that champagne flute in between the hip bones, staying nice and level, scooping down, finding that articulation down, side to side, and especially through that mid-back, just behind the belly button where we might be feeling quite stiff. And it doesn't matter if your hips come back down to the floor, you can still keep that action. And it's almost like you're drawing a little smiley face with your tailbone, just finding that side-to-side action. Good. Last one. Take a breath in. As we breathe out, press into the heels, scoop, tuck, roll, lift, find that bridge position. Take a beautiful inhale. Really allow the rib cage to open, expand with the inhale. And as you exhale, straight through the center of the spine, and it should feel nice and easy to come all the way back down through the center of the spine. Nice work. Placing the hands down, finding your breath again, inhale. And as we exhale this time, we're going to try and keep our pelvis level and float just one leg into our tabletop position. Now, if you're far along on your repair journey, or if you're feeling like you have a little bit more that you can activate through the abdominals, feel free to lift the heel off the floor. And again, just as we did at the start, we come up to the big toe to try and load through the abdominals. If that's too much, heel down for this is absolutely fine. I want you to imagine that I've placed a huge paintbrush directly on top of your knee pointing to the ceiling. You're going to draw me a circle on your ceiling, just keeping centered on that tailbone so you don't feel like you're rocking from side to side through the pelvis. We feel like we're really centered and stable. Have a think about what color are you drawing on the ceiling. Recently, when I've been asking my clients this, they all say red. I don't know if that's because I make them angry. Last two. Last one, and now we're going to reverse that circle. So really feel like it's the thigh bone weighted into the hip socket, finding that circular motion, breathing in, breathing out. Last three. Last two. And last one. Just make sure that this leg is parallel, so you haven't started to externally rotate or internally rotate. If it's still there, keeping the connection between your ribs and hips, so just place your thumbs on the bottom of your rib cage, fingertips on the top of your hips, and just make sure that you feel like the distance between both sides is even and the weight is centered on your tailbone. From here, we're going to add a little femur arc. So inhale and send the thigh bone away. Exhale, draw the thigh bone back in. If you would like to load a little more, don't forget that you can lift the underneath heel. But most of all, as this leg moves away from you, try and keep your pelvis still so it feels like the thigh bone moves independently in the hip socket rather than us feel like we are tipping the hips away from the rib cage to take the leg away. Just 4 more. Inhaling out. Use that exhale. Draw back in. Last 3. Last 2. Good work. Last 1. Inhale out. Exhale back to center. Lower the supporting heel. Lower the leg. Bring both arms into a cactus position, and we're just going to take a little windscreen wiper action through our knees, just finding rotation through the spine. This is one of my favorite things to do. If my back starts to feel tight, just allowing our shoulders to stay nice and anchored, but a nice little rotation to come into the lower back. When you're ready, come back to center, replace the hands down, full breath in. As you breathe out, connect and really feel like everything comes from the core as you float the opposite leg into tabletop. Choice is yours to lift the heel, come up to the pad of the big toe, or keep that foot flat. But we're going to keep that paintbrush on the leg. Inhaling and exhaling to circle, trying to keep your pelvis still, keeping those hips still, and allowing that thigh bone to move within the hip socket. Last 4 in this direction. If you would like to engage the side stabilizers a little more, take your hands more to a T shape. And when you've finished your circles in one direction, take the circles in the opposite direction. What color is your circle on this side? Most people tell me blue on the opposite leg. Sam, what color is your paintbrush? Blue. True. Last 2 circles. And from here, if it feels available, you can always take a rest if you need to. We're adding in that femur arc. Inhale, slide the thigh bone away. Exhale, and draw back in. And don't be afraid to have a look at what's going on here. So as you slide that leg away, you don't want to be mushrooming or doming out through the abdominals. It's never about the range of movement, so some of you may be able to tap your toe all the way to the floor, but don't put any weight in that toe if that's your available range. We want to make sure that even if you're moving an inch out and an inch in, it's that action of taking the thigh bone away and bringing it back that really works through the core. Again, to make it more challenging, you can lift the heel or come all the way up onto the pad of the big toe. Just 2 more. Last one. Lower your supporting heel, Lower the opposite foot. This time, bring both knees into the chest, holding on around the outside of the legs to the shin bones, and just give yourself a little squeeze in. I don't know if you heard that my back actually did click then. You can give yourself a little rock and roll from side to side. And one of my favorite things to do here for my lower back is to open the knees as wide as the shoulders and just find a little bit of space here. If it's available for you, you can take this to a happy baby, taking your heels to the sky, holding on around the outside of the feet, and just finding a little extra in a thigh stretch. Brilliant. As and when you're ready, feet back together, knees back together. You're in the perfect position here to roll onto your side and come all the way to sitting. Wonderful work, team. Hopefully you enjoyed that. And it's something you can come back to, and you'll find as your strength progresses, you'll be able to load a little more and change your foot positioning. Feeling good, Sam? Great. We'll catch you next time. Let us know how you got on in the comments. Thanks.